Hi, my name is Brandon, but you can call me Big Z. And today I'm going to be talking about Mark Lawrence's new book and new series, Red Sister. And I talked about Mark before in one of my first book reviews I did about all of his books. And this one at a time had been out, and I love this book so much that, well, I decided it was worth talking about again. So if you want more info about Mark and his previous series, you can see the other video. But for a little basic catch-up, Mark Lawrence, he is a dual American and British citizen, but he lives in England. And he was a scientist in artificial intelligence, research scientist. But now his writing has gone well enough that he can write full-time and take care of his daughter full-time. And, I think this might be the first book that he's written as a full-time author. And it is an excellent book. Mark has such a great style of writing. He has a great flow to his writing that makes everything really readable, but also he knows how to turn a phrase, and he really has some interesting ways of writing that is probably some of the best literature you'll find in fantasy, and maybe except for Patrick Ross, but something like that. And his books are generally not that long, but they're all insofar in trilogies. And when the trilogy is done, he moves on from those characters. His first two trilogies were set in the same world and kind of go on parallel timelines, but they're different characters. And the new book, Red Sister, is in a completely new world. And, it's impressive for a fantasy author to do that. Because generally, when you create this this world and do all this world building, once you set it up, you don't leave it. You may jump around in time a bit, but in general, a fantasy authors like to stay in that world. I love Mark Lawrence's world building because how he does it is really impressive. Because most authors, especially in fantasy, they'll do a lot of info dumps to try to explain the world and how the world works. But Mark really weaves that world building into his story, so you experience it and bit by bit by bit, and it never feels oppressive. It never slows down the book or what's happening. And he also does some really interesting things with mixing science fiction and fantasy, because Red Sister, it could, if you just read it and don't think about what the world building, what happened in the past and stuff that's going on, it would just read as a magical school fantasy book. But if you pay attention to stuff that's going on, it could easily be a science fiction book. Because, and this, I don't know, I was trying to rack my mind of, are there any other books that tackle this? And I really couldn't think of any. Because essentially in the world of Red Sister, the universe is dying. Or at least the galaxy that they're in is almost dead. Because, in their world, there is, all the stars in the sky are red, except for one. And their world is being enveloped by ice. And, pretty much it's saying that, the galaxy is coming to an end. And sooner rather than later. And I don't think I've ever really seen that anyone explore that like that. Now, because the world building is so interesting, I really want to talk about it. But if you read the book, you get a little bit by bit, and it's a little bit more interesting of how it is told. But I don't really consider that a spoiler, but if you don't want to know about the world building, it might be a slight spoiler for you. But essentially, in this galaxy, the people in this are humans, they say it's humanity. And I almost like to think that this could be, our way millennia in the future, our descendants. But, that possibly our Earth, we colonized other planets. And then when the galaxy kept deteriorating, these four different races from these four planets came to this planet, and they colonized it again, and that's where they stayed. And it's really cool because there's 4 separate races, and that's the Garant, and they're like giants. And then there's the Hunska, and they're like small and really fast and dark haired and like fair. And then there's the Marjal, and that's like a magic sort of race where they are able to tap into like the elements and change parts of the world. But with them, that it affects them differently because they're in this new world where their magic is a little different. And then there's the Quantal, and they're again the magic sort of race, but they walk the path, and they can like absorb this primordial energy and unleash it upon the world, like to a massive destructive effect. And so when they came to this world, you say there's already, this world is under a red star in their solar system, and the world is already being covered in ice. So, and they found to survive this world, they all combined and they intermixed and intermingled their blood, and they had so that their descendants would be able to survive this planet. But there were like the missing, which were the previous inhabitants of this world, and I guess they built tunnels like deep under the ice to survive. And there's like this like if the author wants, he could do a lot of cool things with them in the future books. But for the world to survive, they released a moon, an artificial moon, which circles around the planet and acts as a magnifying glass, essentially, to magnify the red sun, and like every night it has a focus beam that goes across the world on one side and heats it up in that one strip, and that strip is called the corridor. And in the corridor, like the strip all along the world, that's where all the people live. And you have some like the lower class or other people that there are ice tribes that live beyond the corridor, but that's like, you say the ice is like a mile high, and there's so much interesting things with this, and I love so many aspects of it. Like when you're reading it, you're just thinking, oh, that's really cool. How do you think of that? But this happened like millennia in the past, and like from their technology, it must have degraded a bit. So when you're in the main character Nona Gray's time, like it reads as a fantasy world. They don't have guns, but they have magic and they have swords, and it's a fantasy world for all intents and purposes. So ever since they put that in front of me, when they first landed here, they put up that artificial moon. They say that every revolution, it brings it closer to the planet. And there's a children's rhyme that Nona Gray repeats to try to find her center, like to meditate. And that's like, it's falling down. And, that there's one white star in the sky, and they call it the Hope. And there's like a prophecy that eventually there'll be one like person that will show all the powers of each of the 4 original races, and they'll be able to enter one of the arcs, and they'll try to go to that other star and survive again. And there's a lot of cool stuff. It's like you see that the people that most of the people, they're just like more like humans now, after they intermix and everything. But then some people show more of that original blood. So you'll have like some people that when they hit puberty, they'll grow and they'll keep growing until they're like 8 or 9 feet tall. And some people that will be able to like stop a second, will slow down time and be able to move like lightning fast, or they're able to do magic. And like there's different levels for each of these things. The magic system is also really interesting. Like you learn bits and bits as it goes on, as like Nona Gray is learning it herself. And I'm sure they can explore even more in the future books, but it's cool because the coven that she is trained at has a ship heart in it. and that's like one of the power sources that the arcs use to go to this world. And when they're around it, their powers are stronger. Like even if like you barely have any of the magic race's blood, you'll be able to do things that you might normally not be able to do. And it creates interesting things when you say that, that may be also how the ships maybe could travel close to light speed, or there's a lot of interesting things that he could do with that in future books, or just do that more world building with that, which is really interesting. And I just loved that, the aspect of the books. So again, at surface level though, this is essentially a magical school book, a magical school fantasy book. And that's Nona Gray, and she lives like in the gray section of the world, like on the edge of the corridor, like right near where the ice is, in like a poor village. And something happens there, which ends up with her covered in blood, and the village and people in it, they give her to a child seller. And there's this guy that goes around the corridor picking up children that might have the blood of the different races, and they try to sell them to different people, like sell them to the gladiatorial ring, people that run the gladiator fights, or sell them to the academy, or sell them to the nunnery. And that's where eventually she, like, at first she goes to the gladiatorial ring, and things happen there where she murders someone, or almost murders someone, and they say that person is one of the most powerful nobles in the empire, the son of the most powerful noble in the empire. And there's a lot of cool things with that. But when you first see Nona, she's about to be hanged for the attempted murder. And then the abbess, or the head of the Sweet Sister Mercy nunnery, essentially kind of takes her from before being hanged and runs away with her to the nunnery, where she'll be trained, as a nun / ninja / assassin, magical murderer. And once he gets going, it's really good. Like, it's really enthralling. My only problem with the character and with the setting is that when she goes to the nunnery, she's 10. And then later it jumps to when she's 12. And I really think that if it was like 12, then it jumped to 14 or something like that, it would make more sense. Because Nona, she's the main viewpoint character, she doesn't really feel young. Like, she feels older than she is supposed to be. But, at the same time, she's been through a lot, so maybe she's much older than her age would say. There's also some things like towards the climax of the book where her and her friends at the nunnery that are all training to be Red Sisters or Gray Sisters, and they things go down, and she doesn't tell any of the adults. And like, if you told the adults, like, things probably would have gone a lot better. But at the same time, that's like every Harry Potter book did that. Where, if he actually went and told Dumbledore about what's going on, like, things probably would have been solved a lot quicker. But then you wouldn't have a book and all the cool things that happen in it. And there are a lot of cool things in this book, because, like, when he writes the action scenes, like, they are brutal, but also, like, really well written, and you can really follow the action. And he really, especially it reminded me of the new movie Logan and X-23. I couldn't help but picture, like, the character like her jumping around, killing all these people, and it's so visual and well written that I couldn't stop reading when he hit some of those scenes. And I love that when she's doing through the training and the schooling, that is when you get a lot of the world building, like, as you're going on, and you get a lot of like friendship stuff where she's forming friendships with the other girls, and maybe forming enemies, and like, it's really well written. Like, it's like, I really think that this book could be enjoyed by all ages, even though probably not too young, because it does get a little violent, or a lot violent. But I really think that like all like male, female, adult, adolescent, teenager, like I think everyone could find something to enjoy in this book. And I absolutely loved it. The only thing that sucks is that I'm gonna have to wait till next year for the second book, and the year after that for the third book. But at least, unlike some other fantasy authors, all the books are written for this. And the author is kind of crazy. Like, I don't know any author that does that, but he doesn't really edit his books. Essentially, the first proof is what the reader reads. And it's interesting because like it doesn't go through it doesn't really change things. Like he said that if the editor wants him to add things, he will add stuff, but he won't take stuff away. And I'm sure there may be like small spelling errors and things, but really, what he types into the computer is essentially what you're going to be reading, and that's pretty crazy. Like I don't know if some authors would hate him for that or what, because I mean, doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's a perfect book. And I love that. Like similar to his previous stories, you do a little time jumping. Like you have the one main time, then you have like flashbacks. Not as much as the previous books, where like you'll have a really long section of this. And this one is more like in flashbacks. And like it's kind of cool with she's telling the story, and like I love that when she's telling these stories sometimes to her friends, like she's an unreliable narrator, because like and then you'll see what happened, and then she'll change the story again, then she'll change the story again, and I really enjoyed that. And there's also, I love that this, when you have a trilogy or a series, you always worry that you won't have a good beginning, middle, and end in each book. And this Red Sister has a great beginning, middle, and end. Like it feels like if he didn't want to continue the story, I would have been satisfied with this one book. Although I would have wanted no more. But it's it's all here. Like there's a conflict, and there's a resolution, and there's introduction to everything. It's like the main plot points in this story are all solved. Like there are more that will come as a result of how it ends, but that the big conflict is ended in this. And there's also like in this 3 parts of the story: the beginning, and there's one in the middle, and there's one at the epilogue, where there's a sister, nun, and she is, a Red Sister. She's like about to face down an army of mercenaries set to kill her. And like, it's kind of cool with how they do it. Like you think it may be one person, and they do things where like, oh, might it be this thing? Oh, might it be that? And then like when things are revealed about someone that may, some plot twists, and they're like, at the end, they're revealed kind of what may happen that like in the future. And I hope that in the next book you don't jump too far into the storyline. I hope it continues almost like right after this story, but like there's more that she can learn, and I really like that, the magical school aspect of it. So I hope that there's still some of that in the next book. But we'll see. I don't know exactly where he's going to go with it, but will definitely be along for the ride, and I'll definitely be pre-ordering the book. So I would really highly recommend Red Sister, and I think I highly recommend his other books too. The Broken Empire trilogy, that is probably the darkest of the trilogies, and there's things happen more things happen in there that people may not like. And they're excellent books, but I think that the second trilogy is also like, it's not quite as dark grim, or whatever they call that. And this one is probably even slightly less dark than the previous books. And if for a new reader, for like where you should jump on, like I'd probably recommend the newest book because it's so good. But then again, you'll have to wait a little bit for the story to be finished. But then if you really like this book, you can check out his other books, because they're both really 2 great trilogies. And I definitely highly recommend him. He, as more and more books come out, and I like him, I love his books, he's really becoming my favorite authors Like he would already been like my top 5 or top 10, but I think he's climbing that ranks for me because Mark Lawrence, he knows how to write a really good book, and I love his stories. I love his world building. I love his prose, and I really hope more people check him out because I think his work kind of transcends the fantasy genre, and I think that a lot of people could enjoy it as long as you don't mind a little bit of violence. But I give it like a 9.75 out of 10. Like, I don't know if it's perfect, but it was pretty damn close, and I loved it. So thanks for watching. You can check out my other video playlists around my head, or subscribe to me over here. Thanks.